for this.
You good?
Yeah.
I always love that. I never get I never get tired of it.
It's the
I
best.
never. It's awesome. But now, welcome back to another episode of 86'd Life. I'm your host, Neil Streevig, joined in the studio with Brian Hammond, one of you're basically a co-host at this point.
That's my greatest pleasure then.
So I mean, was this like third episode?
Number 3.
All right, very nice, very nice. But
This is the beginning of episode or season 2?
essentially, yeah.
Okay.
So season 2 kind of got caught on hiatus. I had gigs on, and then took over the Chronicle, and I was like, well, I can't exactly run
Nice.
a paper and then do this at the same time. But here we are, finally back in studio. But no, tonight we're going to talk a little bit about the tipping model in restaurants. Anybody that's worked in the industry understands how frustrating that can be. That basically a complete stranger can control your income for the night. And honestly, the wage discrepancy between front of house and back of house, and can it actually work in restaurants? Is it sustainable? We'll dive into that. But first and foremost, honestly, the history of tipping, which honestly, Brian, I've heard you kind of discuss this a couple times too when we've been out and about. But basically started 18th century, indentured servitude. The good job, the noble that you're working for would basically give you like a 10-piece, a little slice of silver. There you go. So the very history of tipping in itself is basically slavery, if you will.
Well, yeah.
It's essentially, your worth is however much they feel at that point in time.
I've heard a few different takes on, there are organic ways that it's kind of grown together, and depending on who tells the story, it can be a little bit different. According to folks that are advocates for it, it's this great thing, but it's pretty much unquestioned that it was the Pullman cars back in the day on the railroad when that was the big business. They would hire. They'd hire freed slaves that could work on. They could work there, but they wouldn't pay them. And it was, if it was the guest's custom to, kind of kick them something, then that was up to them. So it was essentially a platform where they may receive at the grace of their guest, some money for their labor, which is obscene. Yeah. But and now it's still pretty similar. No matter how anybody wants to couch it, not that it's certainly not.
It's not as bad.
There's a form. It's formalized now. There's a formalization to it. But what it really comes down to is the government makes it a legal thing for people in our business to have the guests subsidize your income. Yeah. Now there's the legal base of the federal tip credit.
It's the federal tip, and we'll get into that with the whole new tip policy and all that. But
you will at least make minimum wage for your work.
The whole tipping pool and all that, which gets kind of dicey. But honestly, we'll come back around to the idea of that, just the whole concept that it's still almost like the 18th century ways, to where complete strangers essentially taking your income, essentially.
Yeah, and your employer is federally allowed to say that if you're in this piece of this class of work, we're allowed to contribute less than the absolute minimum for the work you do. So, way to go to culinary school and spend $70,000. Now I'm going to pay you, if you're front of house, I can pay you $2.83.
Yeah. Well, it's frustrating in two aspects, and as well as I do, it's one, essentially you're kind of driving blind, because you make your money Friday, Saturday nights, but the rest of the week, you make $200-300 in a Friday, Saturday night. Monday, Tuesday, you're making $50. That's a huge freaking drop off. Right. And honestly, half the time you go out Friday night, you're stressed. You end up spending half your cash anyway. So
putting more money into restaurants.
Exactly. So it's not really helping out. But my absolute favorite, and we're gonna dive more into the idea of how it actually breaks down, but still the verbal compliment and the fact that it kind of goes back to the ancient kind of times, as we've discussed already. But you're sitting there and you got a table, you're doing a great job, and they're just like, "Oh man, you're the best, the best service you ever had." Just completely just stroking your ego, just letting you just lay it on super thick, and just like, "All right, I'm gonna get a good tip out of this table. It'll be great."
I can't wait to see the tip.
Exactly.
Can't wait.
And then sure enough,
and you sell that $400 bottle of wine.
Yep.
Like, it's at least 20%.
Exactly. And next thing you know, it's 10, 12% at best. And you're like, what the freaking fuck?
Yeah.
Like, you got to be kidding me. That's
I had a guy, and this is not a joke. I was serving, and he said it was a group of businessmen, and they're loving everything. I don't know if they're on expense account or whatever, but they were into it. They're drinking big baller wine. They're just having an amazing time. They're complimenting the service. They're complimenting the food, and they're just like, this wine selection was perfect. You're the man. Asking me questions about my life, and they're loving me. At one point, the guy literally says, "I want to adopt you." It's like he's I want to adopt you. He's like, I love this guy. I love this guy. And then he just jammed me. Like, it was like an 8%er. And it was like, and more to the point, on that table, that was my whole night. I have this group, and that was it. And so my entire night lived and died by these guys. And by all accounts, a complete smashing success. And then for who knows what reason. And the best part about it is, you're killing it. You're like technically on point. You're, vibing with your guests, and it's such a great experience. And at the last second, a minute after they leave, you come to find you made less than half of what you earned.
Yeah.
And you don't know why. Now all of a sudden, instead of, being able to ride that wave of feeling, as I should have been able to walk, come out of that saying, I performed at the highest standard. I did a great job. Some of the chips fell right. There's a bit of luck to it that the guest was receptive to good service, but I gave great service. The kitchen was on point. Everybody did it right.
Yeah.
And for some reason, now I'm sitting here wondering, did I do something wrong?
Yeah.
Did I offend somebody? Did I, when I poured the wine, did the guy next to the guy next to the head of the table just like rip ass or something, and like, and the waiter or the head thought it was me.
Yeah.
And so now all of a sudden I'm sitting there critiquing myself, and I'm like,
You're beating yourself up.
And in the meantime, no matter what, I made 50%, of what I should have made, because it meets, the tip will get me to minimum wage.
Yeah.
So my employer has no skin in the game on that. And there aren't a lot of opportunities where that can happen.
Yeah. Well, it's tough too, because with the employer thing, I don't want to get into yet, because with the whole federal law and all that, we'll get into, because that's going to get a bit dicey. But no, I think customers don't understand either unless you've worked in the industry, just that overall stress, to where you come in and say you're typically one of the best on staff, whatever. Everybody's allowed to have off days. In our industry, you have an off day that could go from your $300 Saturday night to barely cracking 100, and it's how it goes.
Well,
now, that's a huge drop off, but it's essentially
it's arbitrary, and it's ridiculous. You don't. Where else does a customer get to decide the value of a product? Because people are having the tip piece allows the guest to do something that you can't do in other industries. It allows them to remove the service performed from product served. There's a service performed in just about any job, anything you do that you would pay for. Mm-hmm. You don't get to then decide, I'm going to tip is a federally mandated or allowable subsidy of labor. You have to pay as a restaurant owner. You pay your cooks, you pay your dishwasher, you pay your host, but you only have to pay $2.83 or up to minimum wage if they're not tipped at all that day. Mm-hmm. Now, that's labor. So it's the only industry. There may be a few. I have to go back and look it over, but it's certainly the largest industry where you get to just decide on what should be fixed costs in a product served and or service provided. Yeah. You can't just pay your doctor less if yes, there's a component to it where sometimes it's the guest rating a quality of service or something like that and getting to decide.
Yeah.
But that's first of all, that's obscene, but but very often it's not a reflection of the service, and this is where it gets a lot worse.
Well, yeah,
if you think about why you're allowed to, you can make less money because your gender, your race, your weight, your age. These are all things that are in anything else, this would be illegal.
It's a
but,
superficial rating system for sure.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt. If I'd started serving when I was a gorgeous 24-year-old,
yeah,
probably would do better than if I
before the gray hair.
Yeah, before I was gray hair.
Yeah,
and,
so, I've seen you back in your prime. Yeah, it was majestic.
That's majestic. Yeah, but women, young women young white women make the most.
Yeah, and
then you just start ticking off boxes. Are you male? Are you of a certain age? Are you an ethnic minority?
Which is absolutely, you're right, with the superficiality of it. And you hit on it already. You're taking out the whole service attribute, which is the whole idea that it's like we're not even professionals then. We're just basically someone that brings you food, introduces ourselves, whether you listen to our name or not, and then we may open up some wine for you, we may not, but ultimately, we're just a guy writing down,
right?
Well, guy or girl basically writing down what you're saying, and then hopefully we bring you the right stuff. And when you complain, we should just be happy that you're talking to us.
Right. And yeah, and depending on the scale of the place, I think that part of what goes into what things cost and what people expect to tip and all that stuff. I know that people will often tip a higher percentage at a nicer restaurant, and tip less at a lower price point restaurant, which is also kind of ridiculous because that person's working, could be working, if you're working at Eaton Park, you might have 40 people at another restaurant with 15 make the same amount of money. And also, 20% of $300 or 20% of $18. Why are you all of a sudden going, that's a little steep. 20% on that 18. I don't know if I'm going to leave $3.60 for this guy here at Denny's. Like, I think he'll get by with 3.
Yeah. Well, that's with the Denny's argument, though. I mean, that's where the wage discrepancy, because no matter what, we're basically talking fine dining. Most of our background is from that.
Sure.
And when you and I both worked at Stagionis together, I mean, it's still a fine dining establishment.
Yeah.
And we're making way more than the back-house employees in an establishment like that.
Sure.
Even though, we're going to have the ups and downs.
Right.
We make, $50, $60 during the week.
Right.
And Friday, Saturdays, we're basically clear about what? You'd say $150, $200 most nights?
Yeah, depending. I mean, there was a time I worked for a spot in the Strip where, it was definitely a possibility to clear 270 on a Thursday if you got the right assignment.
Yeah.
And it was certainly not harder or longer hours than other service positions I've held.
Meanwhile, the guys in the back, they're working
at
least 10 hours, getting paid essentially half that. I shouldn't say necessarily half that, but
during the service they're getting well less than half.
Yeah.
And as an overall trend, they're probably in the 50 to 70%, depending on the day.
Like when you were cooking, well, I mean, you're going to be opening your own restaurant, but essentially when you're starting off, it was, you'd say basically 10 to 15 an hour is essentially entry.
Yeah, let's see. When I started, I mean, that's not really helpful because that's 20 years ago. But in the modern era, the range was anywhere from, in Southern California, it was a lot lower because the immigrant labor meant that they didn't have to pay you as much because somebody's taking that job.
Yeah.
So I usually, I tended to make a fair amount less there unless it was a union gig. And then the most I ever made as a wage as a cook was 15. That was at a Michelin-starred restaurant. I made 15 an hour, and
that's wild.
And any position where I held salary.
Let's see, how much growth was there really at that point? Because you basically stay there.
Past 15, you would probably be a salaried employee.
Yeah.
Up to management. That was the highest line.
It caps
position.
quick. Yeah.
Yeah, and the best part about it too is that, you can, and it depends on the place and their policies regarding overtime. If they allow you to get a lot of overtime hours, but usually what happens then you take the next step, you go into salary, and and you actually start making a lot less per hour because if you're making $40,000 but you're working 65 hours a week, when you start breaking it down, adjust for all that. I worked at another Michelin-starred restaurant, and I worked about 65 to 70 hour weeks, and I was salaried at $25,000. The servers were clearing $450 a day.
Basically, 2 week span, you're basically getting a little $750 essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, the servers are probably making that Friday, Saturday. Maybe you have to include Sunday, depending on how it was.
Sure.
In 3 days' time.
Yep.
And that's the biggest problem with the fine dining establishments. It's nothing against the town in the front of the house or anything.
No.
They're not worth that amount. But it's not exactly fair that one group is working significantly less amount of hours, somewhat of a less, depending on the tier, less stressful environment compared to back of house.
Sure.
But ultimately, though, too,
different stresses.
their
too.
salary though is still dependent on complete strangers.
Yeah.
It's completely jacked up.
Well, I think
completely jacked
I
up.
think the only thing that where you can start to make a case that the pay scale ought to be different, and I can understand, I can talk about this forever, but is when you take on the component and say, okay, well, chef's dish, all that. These are production. Chef is production. Manufacturing, whatever. Your dish, your host is support staff, and your servers are your sales team. So there are, there are plenty of jobs where, say you work in the warehouse, you make X, and if you work in sales, you make X and commission.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, because they don't think too much into it or don't want to really confront it, there's a tip, and be clear about this. A tip is not a commission. A tip is not a commission because it's not fixed. If it's like a service charge, you could probably say, and that goes into a whole nother zone too.
Yeah.
A commission is a percentage, a fixed percentage of sales, and that's from the employer to the worker or the salesman.
Yeah.
This is totally different. This is product costs X, and then on top of that, guest gets to do whatever the hell they want with your finances. It just doesn't fly anywhere else.
Yeah.
You cannot just, I can't go somewhere and based on my mood or, decide that something costs more or less.
Yeah.
Like it costs what it costs. The service at, you do it anywhere, but things cost what they cost. And the thing too you have to keep in mind is it's horrible to the server because, or great. And that's the bitch of it too is, it can go really well.
Yeah.
It can go really terribly. It can follow a kind of there are trends that you find and kind of find your consistency.
Well, I think that's why a lot of diners though don't understand though. And it's nothing against other jobs in typical like 9-to-5s, but if a bank teller is making their $10 an hour, whatever, clocking at 9, leaving at 5, they don't have anybody come in there and being like, you know what, you worked really hard today, but you're only gonna make $20.
Sure.
And then they come out to dine, but yet they still control that power. And I'm not saying a lot of diners do this. For the most part, everybody's, fairly well-mannered. But it still creates
even think about
that gray area that people can do the wrong thing.
I've been in hospitality for 20 years. I've been a little bit more now. I've been strictly front of house for 3.5 years. And it was a little longer than I expected it to be, but it turned out to be, great education, really useful. But my living has depended on tips for years, and even to this day, and I don't know how you feel about this, but I consider myself to be a decent person. I don't consider myself to be cheap. I feel like I tip well, above the 20% for the most part. I feel like, and I'm very empathetic towards hospitality. We're in the business.
Yeah.
People in hospitality tend to tip quite a bit better. I'm not an exception, but I'd be lying if I said that there haven't been times that I've tipped differently based on relatively arbitrary things.
Yeah.
And that's not. I'm not the guy that goes out and I'm never going to punish a server. I know a lot of people that like that. They're like, and not just because they're sadists, but because because to them it gives them leverage for good experience. It's like if this guy isn't, I don't like the way he's the way he's eyeing my girlfriend, or I don't, or he's
That's
just
typically why I'm not getting well.
Or he's slow or whatever it is. It's like this is my leverage on you to get the best that I can get.
Yeah.
And that's ridiculous. But the other piece of it is, I'm typically going to tip about 20 to 25%, depending on the environment.
Yeah.
But
you're hitting at it.
But here's some of the simple, silly ways that I've tipped differently than on a percentage basis.
But see, you already said you're biased though. That's the thing, and like you already touched on though as well. Like
but I'm saying I'm saying I'm biased towards the good. You would say, right? But it's still not. There's still a huge amount of arbitrary bullshit in there. Like if I go to a bar at an airport and I buy a beer and I'm waiting for a flight, the beer costs $7.20, and I happen to have If I have a 10, then I'm going to leave 280 as the tip.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what is that? That's like 30-some%. I don't,
Yep.
My brain's not working well, but that's 30-some%. However, if I have $12 in my pocket,
Yeah.
10 to ones, I'm going to tip. Now I'm tipping 580.
Yeah.
Or 480. I'm sorry, my math's terrible. That's stupid.
But you're doing the right thing, and that's what I'm saying. Like, we're both
Yeah,
biased
yeah,
because we
bias-
do this
bias
because we
towards
understand.
good.
Yeah, because we understand how it is. But
What it's the final analysis of that is based on things that have absolutely nothing to do with the cost of goods served, the service provided, the environment that it's served in. The cost is different.
Yeah.
When you change and if you leave the cost of the product and the tip separately, it's an illusion. Did I not give you, like, if I give you $30 and $5 of it's a tip and $25 is what I was charged, did I only just spend $25 and like $5 is just a thing I did for humanity?
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. Like, you don't go to the fucking car dealer and say like, I bought this $30,000 car, but I bought a $25,000 car.
yeah,
Like, wait a minute, but then why did you write a check for $30,000? Oh, well, I decided to give them some money for services rendered. No, that's like,
Yeah.
because I figured a little bit more to the guy in the garage today.
So
I love the wax
But no,
job
like-
on the fucking hood. Like, so you don't get to do that. And the worst thing, the final effect of that is, and as a restaurateur, you factor in, if I'm thinking about, or somebody's thinking about what are my servers going to make?
yeah,
At this place, food's going to cost X per guest check average. You can approximate they're going to make their 283 plus 20% X. You're calculating that. That all goes into the equation. But the fact is, when you're working out your financials, the way it should be is that the price of an item is the cost of the material that goes into it, the cost of the
Yeah.
manufacturing, the process that goes into it, and then all of the overhead and all the tangential costs. The cost to light the showroom, the cost to, payroll tax, everything. It's money in.
it's everything vendored in.
It's
for
money,
sure, yeah.
money in, money out, and the amount that you charge your guest or
Yeah.
your client, the number that they see that they pay, is that number. Now, unless it's like Comcast or something, there's like 3,000 hidden expenses. But even then, at some point, you're given a bill
Yeah,
and it's itemized. These are your charges.
yeah. Services
In
vendored.
in our business, so your $30 meal does not cost $30. It costs $36. But you're allowed to go in there, and when you're price point comparing on false numbers. When you go to a no tipping restaurant, and I've only been to a few, but when you go to a no tipping restaurant, I remember the first time I went to the one that was in the north side, and it was like first thought. And even though I'd been aware of probably 10 different times, I was like, oh yeah, that place is a no tipping spot. That's great. I really support that. But the first time I went there, I had people with me. I was in a conversation. I had things on my mind. I'm not actively thinking about what they do. I look at the menu and I was like, Jesus Christ, $13 for that Sauv Blanc? Like, that's like, I don't think you're gonna make it. And then like a couple seconds later, like, oh no, it's a no tipping spot. That's perfectly rational. And you know what? That's what it costs. And you have to kind of settle into a different financial perspective on what you're doing. Going to Europe, it's the same deal.
See that, but we're biased because we understand what goes into it.
Right.
And
Well, you have to think about it.
as you said before, like, you have the angry customer wants to put one on you, has that malice,
Right.
and the tipping model allows for that malice to happen from the customer. And 9 times out of 10, I think customers do the right things,
Sure.
but it still allows that avenue to happen.
Right.
And then they don't
Yeah.
understand that if you take the no tipping, you do that policy, the increased price then, and the price points on each product is higher. So like you said, like, they don't understand the fact that there's 3 services. You're getting the bar service, you're getting the actual at-table service, and you're getting the culinary program service as well.
Right. Well, yeah, and the clean glasses and the toilet works.
And when you factor all those in, then it's like, all right, at the menu now, this is what you're getting in the no tipping restaurant. This is everything factored in, tipping's out of it. But still, I think customers, especially here in Pittsburgh, and we've had some successful no tip policies, and then unfortunately Casalua just left, and they're the third in the group. But I think that's still
and Dinette's only been doing it for a really short time.
I think maybe 4 or 5 months thereabouts. So and Barmoka's basically been the only successful.
And they've been
one.
at it for a while.
Yeah.
That was well done.
And I say Livermore, though, unfortunately closed, and that was still
Sure.
same group. But that's the thing. Pittsburgh's not it's not an anomaly by any means. It's going to happen in any city to where certain restaurants is going to work for you and certain restaurants it's not. And
Right.
that's the biggest factor,
Well,
too. What works for what said restaurant,
yeah.
but the customers and the clientele still have to be aware of why they're making this change, understanding that.
It requires a level of interest, sophistication, and attention. You
Yeah.
know, typically, and this is the tell. You know, where did you start seeing this happen? You know, with some consistency first, San Francisco. Well, of course,
Yeah.
people are thinking it's a more liberal environment. People are going to think about like, oh man, like yeah, I'm going to totally, you know, I'm going to eat this rice cake, but like, what about the guy that made it? Like, you know,
Yeah.
that's cool. Like it's whatever your feelings about it. It is a more. I'm trying to think of a word that doesn't bring a lot of. Doesn't put a lot of like my emotional like opinion about it. But you'd say objectively it's
Yeah.
it is a more informed approach. Like you
Mhm.
have to know things about what's going on, and then you do have to have, you know, to submit to that and say, yeah, this is acceptable. I'm willing to see the prices be
Well,
different.
you have to look past the food, which I think Pittsburgh is still slowly, I think, getting to.
Yeah, well, and you also have to look past. You have to look past just what's familiar.
Yeah.
I mean, your whole experience and it's always been the tipping.
Yeah.
If that's because that's America.
Yeah.
That's
That's what's engraved in this. Yeah.
right.
It's-
And so it's jarring no matter what. It's what is it? Cognitive dissonance. You experience cognitive dissonance when you're in a no tipping environment. I do all the time. It's the same as when you talk to servers who have served for years, and bring up the concept of going no tipping at their establishment.
Yeah.
Even before you've thought about it, you don't like it. The knee jerk is no because it's very different and it's unfamiliar.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are the ramifications? You know, like
Well, it's unfortunate too, and you weren't at the tips off tipping point at Scratch and that whole conversation we had. Based the
I
same
was
premise.
sorry to miss
And,
that because those are great conversations to have.
And Kaiser, the owner at Brian Kaiser, the owner at Casalua, mentioned basically location was the biggest factor than the price point. And like we're both Northsiders, and
Yeah.
absolutely,
What was the contention? That you're saying the location was
a problem for him, and it makes sense. There's not much foot traffic there. Most people, you come to the north side, you come in there for a said reason. You're not going to be walking down looking for a bite to eat. So naturally, it cuts you in half, big
Sure.
time.
But I mean, it's and there were a few things about it. I mean, it's a north side thing. Is like that
Well, we're a food desert up there.
and the building is like gorgeous.
Yeah,
It's a beautiful. You walk once you're in there, you know you're in a place where you're going to spend money.
Yeah.
But yeah, around it, I mean, there's
You
light
got
of life
yeah.
and the shell of the Garden Street Theater.
Yes, yeah. It's not
But
very
also
inviting.
like and you definitely it takes intentionality to go there. Like
Yeah.
you have to decide I'm going. However, I mean you are a block from the War Streets. There's a little cash rolling around there.
No doubt.
You
no
know,
doubt.
so I think that the idea that you weren't going to get a lot, location wasn't manufacturing a lot of new area, like new out of area traffic. That's fair enough.
which is tough. But when you have that, and then again, just the culture of it, and I guess we already mentioned, you don't understand the whole price points. It makes the point like, do you ever think the industry will see a massive change, like essentially, as far as to where?
Yeah, I mean the short answer is no, but maybe. I think what's going to happen is I think soon, or I think we're starting to see it, and I mean, not in a like Oprah sense, but like in a real meaning of the word sense. Like I think that the people that decide to do that are brave. You know, so for the folks at Marco and Sonia Finn. I mean, Sonia's. I mean, obviously that's a person who's very, very interested and very invested in issues of social justice and and I think that kind of mentality comes through in all the things that they do.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of guts because you have a lot of. This is it's a risky business in general because the margins are so low, and kind of the higher, more fine dining and you know, the more attention that goes into the product, usually your margins start to get lower and lower. So you're already kind of on the razor's edge, but the most scarce resource right now, everywhere, and certainly in Pittsburgh, is labor, good labor. So getting good people getting and keeping good people is going to be the game, and because we're still expanding, like we're still opening new restaurants all the time. I mean, I'm one of those people. so the more restaurants, zero culinary schools as opposed to the two that we used to have. Uh, you got to become like the employer of choice, and that's an important piece. Um,
Do you
and if most servers, most established servers, knee jerk, do not want to go to a no tipping place,
but do you think the conversation?
you're putting yourself at risk. And
Yeah.
But if you can endure through that, then I think that if you can break through, that there's a really beautiful place on the other side. But
it's tough to get.
We're going to lose a lot of
Yeah.
you're going to lose a lot of lives getting through that wall.
Yeah.
So
as we thought about off the air, Myers himself. I mean, if he's had problems with it, then it's definitely it's going to be across the board like that.
Danny Myers to me is like one of the. He's a hero. Like to me, like his book Setting the Table, I think is like one of the greatest things written about our industry.
Yeah.
It's an amazing book, and I mean, I used to buy them 10 at a time on Amazon and give them out at my restaurant. And I'm sure they're holding up like leveling coffee tables all around the North Hills, but the thing about it was it's a great read, and I was like, this is an amazing book, but it could be bullshit. It could just be his. A lot of people say, I read another book about the excellence and detail. Every detail is important and all this. And I went to the chef's establishment and was really let down. And half of the things that were in there that were like hallmark, like just bedrock stuff, were like completely contradicted within a half hour of me sitting down in this restaurant. And it was really, I'll say it, the place doesn't exist anymore. It was Charlie Trotter's. I've been reading his books since years before I went to culinary school.
Yeah.
And it's probably been 9 years of reading his books, buying his books, borrowing my chef's books and taking them home, reading them.
Yeah.
And then I bought Lessons in Excellence, and it's like it is just a tome of like it's a manifesto, and I went there and like all these things that I was like really excited to see. I mean, it was a really good meal.
Yeah.
It was but it wasn't exceptionally special. It wasn't, and it was nearer to the end of his run. But and of course, it's I'm sure it's a great was a great restaurant. It was an influential restaurant. It really was, and maybe those things were happening at the time that the book was written or something. But there were like basic things that just either didn't happen or went the opposite way of what you'd anticipate. And I was heartbroken. Yeah. But anyway, that gets to Meyer. I've met a lot of people that have worked for him, and across the board, everybody's like, no, he talks the talk, and he definitely walks that walk.
Yeah.
So when he went into this thing, I took huge interest, but it's not. There's a lot of contradiction about how that's going.
Well, the thing is, it's like if someone like him, who, as you said, was sitting at the table, is so invested in the industry, is still having problems with it, then it's going to have problems across the board. But
right.
There's no quick answer to it. But we kind of hit that with Sandra Finn and Dinette, and kind of popped in my mind. We keep talking about the idea that we have to train the customer and all that. I do think that's a big thing,
sure,
especially in spots like Northside and everything else, to where you just it is a bit of food desert. It just takes time for that culture to understand dining, because there hasn't been any dining in that environment.
Yeah.
But for the whole no-tip policy and for it to work, which I think across the board, if anybody's in the industry long enough, you're pretty much for it, unless you just want to keep the front-of-house service racket kind of to yourself. But
a lot of servers are against it. I understand why. But I think once you've really looked into it and really thought through it, you kind of have to check your own shit at the door.
But that's the thing, too. Like, should the argument be wage discrepancy more so than tipping, and focus on that rather than the idea that let's explain price points, let's explain why we're doing it from internally rather than that? That's a big thing, too.
I think for the majority of people, for everybody that's not a server or a bartender, there's not much of a conversation that even needs to be had.
Yeah.
For the servers, I think that it takes I think there needs to be a consistent and persistent exchange of information, because what servers don't get, not all servers, but what
large majority
but the
what
trend is that as a server, it's the same as being as a guest.
Yeah.
You're born and raised and soaked in this environment, and it's such a change. And as a server, and this is another part of what makes tips kind of sick and why they're toxic to the work environment. Nothing is more important to you if you work to live, and almost everybody that works in hospitality is, counts on it to support their life.
Yeah.
What's the most important thing then to you as a server? It's your tip, not the people that you work with, not the team, the guest to a degree, but like the tip, because that's how you make your living. So it's like, I used to laugh.
Well, it's immediate validation though too, which
it turns
is addictive in its own way. In that
it turns
sense,
you into a different type of beast, and
Yeah.
and some people come into it. Some people they take to the job because they are of this nature, and some people pick it up.
Yeah.
I for myself, and this is the little room of admission. I'm the confessional. I'm like bad Catholic. I can't remember. Like anyway, I'm having revelations here.
Yeah.
No, but I cooked and or like owned operated restaurants for 17 years. Bartended for about 2, served and bartended for a year and a half. Now, I had clear thoughts, perspectives, and feelings about servers and a number of different things. And, there's nothing better. Anybody that's good about their work, good at their job and cares about their work and puts craft into it is awesome. Yeah. Anybody, anything. I find it inspiring, and more so outside of our industry when I see people that like, if I go to get a haircut and I see their Mies is all like, all their scissors and combs are lined up and they're clean on a polished, tray, and the hair is all swept off. Like, it's just something about seeing like, look at the like intentional, like the intention and the attention to detail and the hustle. It is inspiring anywhere you see it. And with servers, certainly no different. Like, my best experiences have been more. We talked about this in the big like servers versus cooks argument or conversation, but I also remember thinking like, and as a cook, as a owner, there's a lot of greed that gets involved, and a lot of bullshit, and a lot of things that like just create negative culture. And like, how can they be complaining? How can they be complaining about their side work? Because they're only making $283 right now. Like, no, I mean, you were making $47 an hour 42 minutes ago, and now you don't give a shit because you're only making your $283. The argument would be you balance it out and all that, but there's no doubt you watch the switch go off on a server the minute that they're not earning, and I resented that as a cook. I was aggravated and inconvenienced by it as an owner, and I would be a liar if I said that the switch went off to a degree with me. I mean, it's in spite of me constantly monitoring myself, I found myself going like, Jesus, when is this day going to end? And I'd been there for like 6.5 hours, I'd becoming the thing that I despised. Yeah. But
I think what a lot of people...
It's the conditioning of the structure. Yeah. You have two different types of work.
That's the thing. I mean, I don't think a lot of people understand that when you go into it, the service aspect of it, it's still a thing of power, and you're still going to have that. But yeah, it comes down to when you're behind the line, you have those shitty days, and then all of a sudden you're just like, Christ, what the hell am I doing this for? And you got a server's basis making it rain, and they're getting out an hour early. They're gonna go get shit-faced, and you're just like, I still gotta shut down. So I guess I'll see you guys when you guys are sloshed, and I'll just like go kick this imaginary can't hate my life.
Sure,
so
right.
That's 9 times out of 10. I mean, and
I'll be the guy sitting next to you, smelling like wings.
Exactly, and thankfully, like the dark side of culinary hasn't really hit Pittsburgh as a population, but depression's way more a serious thing back at house. Sure. And this is, I think, a huge reason why the wage discrepancy, and you kind of have to live with that day in and day out.
Sure.
And just the competitive nature that back of house has compared to front of house, rather than, hey, you know what, we're all on the same page. We're working for said establishment. This is the goal in mind. Yeah. And then when you go to the table, they understand that. Hopefully you're having that conversation right from jump, being, hey, prices reflect this. Let them know basically a mission statement out of the gates. And that transparency across the board is only a good thing. Yeah, but it's a tough thing to do, and you would think it would be like, oh well, like, all right, you're doing this cool thing, everybody's on the same page, and you guys are, a team. That's crazy. That's awesome, but it doesn't work.
And I think a huge argument to, a reason that the tipping stuff, what's a change that was really something you didn't see a lot of 10 years ago, certainly 20 years ago. Most service positions, you came in, you worked your shift, you walked with cash. A lot of your tips were in cash. Your declaration was whatever it was, and over the years, since the vast majority of transactions have moved into credit and debit cards, so it's automatically reported. So your declaration percentage from what it used to be, servers when I was younger, were declaring 50% of what they actually made, 40% of what they actually made, getting taxed a lot less. So you're actually even making more than you made because it's not subject to the taxes. Now with the credit situation, a lot more is getting taxed, and so a lot of restaurants smartly have gone to not tipping out. You don't walk with you're not going home on a Saturday night with $262 in your pocket. It goes to your paycheck. It is aggravating, and for servers threw a shit fit about that 15 years ago, 10 years ago, and a lot of restaurants still do the cash out. At Echo, we did. I wished we hadn't. I won't do it again because, and here's a million reasons why, but I'll give you a few. One is it's a huge pain in the butt to have to do all this cash handling, and what you're doing is you essentially become an ATM because the money is coming to me as credit card stuff, and I'm paying a credit card processing fee. So part of that processing fee is to get you your tips. Then I have to carry thousands and thousands of dollars on top of I'm making withdrawals above my deposits to pay these people out. And there's the more cash you handle, the more mistakes you're going to be made. And then as a server, you're walking with money that feels like a prize. Once you get that thrill of freedom, you hit the cool spring air, and you got money to burn. Yeah. If you were just earning money and it's going into your bank account, then it's with all the rest of your money, and you go, all right, I have to make an informed financial decision. Yeah. And the fifth piece of that, or sixth, what I haven't counted, is, do you really want to be a 20-year-old woman walking alone with $300 in your purse? Yeah. It's not safe. So, but the thing about that is that when they made that change, though, and not everyone has, but people do not like it because it's different and it's inconvenient at first.
Well, anything different is going to frighten people. That's just nature of humans, which
people
is a whole other argument.
People go berserk about it. But the trend of all this money changing to credit from cash kind of necessitated it and made it a good time to make that transition. And I think with tipping, you could kind of start to make more of a case for it now for that as well, that you're seeing less cash because the money has to be handled, it has to be processed, and like you're saying, the transparency issue, we can't really hide from the government as much as we used to. Yeah. And I think that
we got with the you kind of talked about already with the cash outs and everything else in the night, but very standard labor act. And the idea of the tipping pool and essentially having the employer mandate your cash out and essentially wait out. Mm-hmm. A lot of negative feedback with that naturally because essentially now you don't control your tips at all.
Right.
Almost. Employee essentially
as long as minimum wage happens
is met,
then they can do whatever they want.
Which is crazy because then you're getting basically double fisted then because
if you
hit with the customer and then now possibly a bad restaurateur, a bad boss can stiff you as well. On the opposite side though, could there be good faith though to where a couple of restaurateurs actually use that and try to make a balance? Is that even possible?
You can make the argument, but it's like
you need to make significant dough for that to happen on a nightly service.
I think about
because it's a $5 gap. You got to cover pretty much every employee with the hours, everything else to get the minimum wage.
There's a conversation that I've had a number of times with like business owners, and a lot of them are, if you're in like certain segments of of industry or whatever, they'll express frustration about unions, and it's without getting into the political nature of all of it. Yeah. They're like, why this is ridiculous, like all these things that I have to do and like all this government control, and the cost of it and the lack of efficiency. And I'd say, listen, you're really good to your people. And if everybody was you, we wouldn't need these rules. We wouldn't need unions if everybody was a responsible employer. Yeah, most people aren't responsible employers. Most people are. That law change, and again, not to stay into the political sphere for very long, but if you needed a bigger, we are gonna fuck you sideways, and you got nothing to say about it. Yeah. Like how it is one of the most blatant, offensive, ridiculous, like and they're like,
It's
oh,
basically saying like, hey,
hey,
you
listen,
work hard,
no
we
one's-
don't give a shit.
and you know what? No one's going to take advantage of that.
Yeah.
The restaurateurs are the finest people I know. I mean, like, there's no way that giant food chains are gonna ram their employees.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got a great history of doing the right thing. My career, and I'm a fortunate I'm a fortunate person. I'm
Yeah.
not like, but and there were times. I mean, I worked way more than I was working overtime hours as a 21-year-old in Southern California. Really expensive place to live.
Every time you say SoCal, I just picture you on the beach just with like a fryer next to you. Like,
Yeah.
you're just trying to relax, but there's a deep fryer just next to you.
I did have one job that was kind of like that. I had one kitchen with an ocean view. It was pretty sweet. But no, but I'm working in an environment where it's really expensive.
Yeah.
Being paid garbage, and I worked one job. They had a sign on the wall that said overtime will neither be worked nor paid. Now that was code for we will let you work overtime, but you're just going to get standard wage. It's like blatantly illegal, and it was a stated policy.
Yeah.
So I'm working 50 hours in a kitchen, working hard, and I had to get a second job to pay rent in a small, crappy apartment. Like, it was a cheap apartment in a bad part of town, and I had nothing as far as, like, it's not like I was going out. I didn't have cable. And I was regularly getting my power shut off, getting into payday loans. I experienced for a few years, like, real poverty and, like, crushing, anxiety-ridden, just a real bad few years. And, but here's the real truth of it is if I had completely, and we were broke. But I had the option if I would have taken it, and I wouldn't have. But anyway, the point being, if it got to the absolute point that I could have always put up the bat signal and gotten help from my family.
Yeah.
There was always a bit of like a safety there, I suppose. I wasn't taking it, but I'd be a liar if I said it didn't exist. And it was important to me that I didn't do that. But there are most of the people that are in this don't have a fallback. This is it. So, like, how can you say that somebody that's skilled and hardworking and working hard,
and you can mandate their pay,
and their electricity's off?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's...
Well, you touched on the big thing with the chains, which, again, like, back house employees are actually making more than front house. They're not making much.
In the lower price point restaurants.
But in the grand scheme of things, to where this is going to affect them way more than fine dining, to where most of the time the clientele is still going to take care of the front of house for the most part. Like, naturally, you're always going to have the bad customers, and ultimately someone may not be getting paid their worth, and it's still extremely fucked up that someone controls your income.
Yeah.
But hey, that's the nature of the beast right now. It's what we have to live with. But in those chains, like Ian Park and everything else, they're gonna get shit. They're gonna get hosted, no doubt about it, and they're gonna get fast. And like, that's messed up in its own right. And I don't think there's anyone necessarily looking out for them. And this law is definitely not going to look out for them in the sense that those guys are still dealing with the status quo, and no matter what, there's the biggest problem, and why the wage discrepancy to me is a factor. I think front of house and back of house, and why the typical model to me like just agitates me. There's basically no professional movement really up the chains,
right?
And there's no way you basically get further. There's nothing to really aspire to.
Right.
So you either get stuck making money. You're 20 years old, going to college. You make $300, $400 a weekend. You're happy doing that, and you kind of just stick with it because it's a fun and addictive industry. And if you enjoy adrenaline, and it's never boring, and it definitely demands you, and it's immediately self-gratifying. At the end of the night, you know how much you made, and you feel like you actually contributed something to the said workplace. With the back of house, still kind of same concept. You still have your own set goals, your own set mandates. It's pushing you. But ultimately, I mean, what are you going to go? Garmin J, Hotline, sous chef, chef de cuisine, executive chef.
Well, executive chef, but you're even not going to make a lot of money in that unless there are a few, unless you're going to run the right golf club or hotel, or
you basically have to sell out. You're not even cooking food. Then what got you?
Exactly,
your passion's gone now.
Yeah, I mean, like it was like a fate worse than death for me to think that, like, one day I might have to be like some of the bosses I'd had. Like, I'm gonna have to run a resort and. Joyless.
I think we talked about in the front house back house debate too. But with the front of house, what is your aspirations as a server? Are you gonna be sommelier?
Sommelier, GM. Yeah. And the thing about it that sucks, and you're exactly right. Part of the reason too that there's such a limited scope of of things is that when things don't cost what they actually cost, you don't have, as the employer or like in the industry at large, you don't have a lot of opportunities to create different. There's a whole component, a massive component of your financial picture that is unsecure, and since you don't have it, I guess now you can make the argument that thanks to our caring federal government, that you do have the opportunity as an employer to manipulate that money.
Yeah.
It still doesn't make sense that it should be, determined arbitrarily, but, that they can push resources into different areas. If that endures, you will see some changes. I don't know where it will go, but the thing about the tipping model too is that when you fixate on something like tips, it puts you in this immediacy. It's just this moment. You lose big picture perspective.
Yeah.
A lot of servers that used to say, they were right to say it, but you could see when they were feeling it and when they weren't, which is like, I'm not making, you've got to go long view, and you've got to see, I'm not making $47 an hour and then $2.83 an hour. I'm making $26 an hour tonight, or whatever the thing would be.
That's still for your shift, though.
Yeah.
That's for that said
Well,
shift.
exactly,
So.
and that's good. It's good to have some long view, but you can't think on a weekly, monthly, yearly.
Yeah.
Because
it pigeonholes you, but
because I make this much in December, and then I make this much in January, and but it's hard to plan. It keeps you out of a long-term perspective, and what that then creates too is it takes a certain level of commitment and seriousness from the position, and it makes you feel like what you feel like is a mercenary, a hired gun, and what you don't feel like is a trained, invested professional.
Yeah.
And those attitudes, and there's no question that does benefit a lot of the organizations. That if you're a really giant producer of food, if you're like I don't know, like maybe if it's the say the Olive Garden or something.
Yeah.
I don't know, and it's not like a vendetta against them or anything, but they're not. They have very little to do with what a place like. We'll stick with Italian restaurants.
Well, no, like
a single unit operation. That's chef driven. And it's a single proprietor. It's like some guy opens a restaurant, or some lady, some woman opens a restaurant. She's the chef. She's working 1 million hours doing her thing. She cares about the food. She cares about the service, and she's like, you're invested in everything, and wants like serious professionals to come in and like encourage their growth and all that.
Yeah.
That's a little small business. Something like the Olive Garden, they have thousands of outlets. It's really, and you have to maintain consistency across.
They just do the cookie cutter. That's what they have there. So everything's measured out. Everything's weighed.
And there's a lot of good things about that. Honestly, it doesn't turn you on if you're coming from a culinary perspective. But that's. To think that they're the same thing is to make a huge mistake, to make a big mistake right away.
Yeah, it comes back to what we're trained to, because that's essentially all of us have been at a franchise at that. It's one of the first things we go to,
But think about this too. Now, the problem is that place, Dinette and the Olive Garden they're just about not anything in common.
No.
But most of the customers and a majority of the people in our business don't see the differential. I mean, they see it as like there's a curve.
I'm glad we don't have Yelp reviews for the podcast, because I feel like we would have got bashed on that one right now.
Well,
I'm saying, but most diners, if you said that to them, they'd be like, "Oh my, I know there's a complete difference."
No.
I'm with you.
No, but what I mean is they see a difference in
product.
They think that there's a scale.
Yeah.
And the Olive Garden's here and the Dinette's here.
But their habits are still the same of how they go.
They're not even on the same scale. Yeah. They shouldn't be. Like they're not. I am not in the business. I am not in the business of being like. I'm not a manufacturing and presentation facility. I'm in the business of actual hospitality. I don't want to get into semantics. Somebody will find the argument, but I've bashed my head on the rock of this with a guy who's been helping me with like a lot of like HR structuring and marketing.
I'm gonna cut you off on that, because you were on the point with the idea of professionals and all that, and how you come in and that self-imposed standard, which we've drilled a bunch on this show already.
Sure.
And that's the problem, because if you have that self-imposed standard, you're going to find a way. And a lot of people that are in this industry are self-motivated. So they're gonna find a way to make this shitty model work no matter what.
Yeah.
And that's a big problem though too, because since we just want to basically make things work, bring our best into each service, do our thing.
Yeah.
We're not really looking at the long form then or long term either, as you said. So
Yeah.
you're basically just living each week, each shift essentially. And
Yeah.
that's the bigger problem in itself, to where we're almost allowing ourselves to get bent over the barrel and not really looking at it and be like, hey, you know what?
Right.
It's not really fair that I work a 6-hour shift, make $300, and these guys work 10 hours and making half that. And I get to go home and, do what the hell I want to do.
Yeah,
It's not
well,
exactly right.
And it really hurts continuity in restaurants. Consistency is everything. It's one of the reasons that those giant restaurant like chain models work, is because there's if I have this item in Pittsburgh, it's going to be the same as when I had it in Honolulu, and the same as when I had it in Nome, Alaska, and that's kind of a remarkable thing. That's like all from Howard Johnson's model and all this stuff, which it's an impressive thing to pull off. It of course it starts to sacrifice and lose other things, but it's an impressive model. But continuity, they're able to like systematize what's going on. They're able to, when you're a small restaurant, you're a small business owner, you're a restaurateur, continuity is still, it's equally important. Your guests need to know that you're going to deliver on the promise of quality, that this dish is going to be the same if you come back the next time. But you know how hard it is to maintain continuity when you can't have employees that want to have a buy-in and an investment to think that they can make a career of it.
Yeah.
So what you wind up with is this turnover turnover is the killer. So what's the solution? You need to make it in the best interest of your employees to be with you. Now, if I can't charge my guests what food really costs, then I can't really do anything meaningful for my employees.
Yeah.
And now this is true, and whether you take me out of it, maybe I'm lying. There are people in our business who care a lot about their employees.
Yeah.
Like a lot. There are different types of folks that do this thing.
There's always going to be varying degrees.
Sure. Some of them are going to be opportunistic and are looking to like shave the edge and make money off their people in a different way. Some people are shitty, and there are a lot of good people that care a lot, and they are trying to find ways that they can take care of their people, because they knew how shitty it was for them when they were coming up and they couldn't make it. And I mean, I'll speak from my own personal experience, and I've had this conversation with other restaurateurs. You can't compete. You can't price point compete and maintain a healthy business and take care of your people.
Yeah.
At Echo, the only way that I could get raises to my core staff, my like excellent sous chefs, pastry chef, the only way that we could get bonuses or pay increases to people was literally we'd take money from ourselves. I'd cut my own salary, cut my wife's salary.
Yeah.
Sorry, Terry. But like she,
But you guys,
it was
aware of
a
that?
good thing to do.
Yeah.
It was the right thing to do. It was our decision, yes. But
because you guys put everything, it was your baby, and you guys wanted to have.
But if a
successful
$30 meal costs $30,
yeah,
then it's a model that it makes it's a truthful model. There's not elusive or illusions of cost and all this. And when you play with it's a simple psychology. It's sensible that the NRA, the National Restaurant Association, wants to keep it going, because it's a hell of a racket.
Yep.
I mean, it is, but it's bullshit, and it is against. Why doesn't every business do that? Because it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So it takes all of the integrity and like all of the dignity out of the exchange. I'm not like, we're not. This isn't. We're not at a. This is all. What was it? The 86'd conference, or what was it called?
86'd conference. Yes.
So the 86'd conference. There a lot of discussion,
So
especially on the
Ace
last.
Hotel, and what was it, May or June? No, July, I think.
I can't remember. Yeah, it was. But it was the lady who spoke the last day. I can't remember her name, but she was on New Orleans.
Yeah, she's the GM, I believe, at the Ace Hotel in New Orleans.
Yeah. She gave a really excellent, thought-provoking speech and led a discussion about remember she was saying that the thing that comes from slavery and the other piece of it comes from the old aristocracy, and to a degree, there's a lot of intersections between those, but where you're beholden to your employer, it could be your employer or your master or whatever it is, and speaking quite literally that everything that you do is in the interest of pleasing this person, and if you do it, then maybe they will kick you. Maybe they will see. They will see through to a little something will come drip down to you. That is still a very active component of the exchange, and there's no fucking dignity in that kind of service. You know what? Like the guy that builds your house, you pay him what it fucking cost.
He actually tells you what
you don't just pay for the wood.
He actually picks his price. He's like, I'm going to charge you this. And
you don't
just okay.
You don't just pay for the wood and the nails. You pay for the expertise, the actual labor, the muscle, and you know what? The guys that have more specialized skills make more money, and you don't question that. Nobody questions that. Yeah. But like in our industry,
you immediately question right away.
But our industry, we are all worth shit. Yeah. Like the best server at some of our finest restaurants, and the worst guy coming to work drunk with his pants pants half off, like stinking his cigarettes, coming up to your table and like forgetting your order and like drooling on your table. That guy also is worth $283. The most educated, like level 3 SOM. And now, of course, there are positions you can get, but if you decide that you're going to pursue service, in the vast, overwhelming majority of environments, we are all exactly the same, equally worthless, equally worth a little more than a third of the minimum. Like it's
crazy.
It's fucking insane. And the funny piece of it too, and it does create on top of that great.
Let me ask you this, though, man.
There's one thing I do have to say, because it's just because it clarifies the picture of the cost. Now, because I think I've said a few times that I meant to clarify. Like your $30 meal or whatever. A lot of guests, and the other thing that tipping allows you to do by creating artificial pricing. The funny thing is that chicken that chicken that costs you $25, that $25 chicken dish is actually a $30 dish, right? Now the guests would say, "What? Fuck you! Chicken's $6.99 a pound."
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Or one of the worst things about the internet, if you work in hospitality, is when your guest opens the wine list and then opens their Google browser, because you're like, Jesus, it's going to be a slog, because they're able to see, wait a minute, this wine only cost, this is a $9 bottle of wine and they're charging $8 for a glass.
How dare they? Yeah.
But here's the deal. Nobody.
I'm starting to buy Dr. Pepper over Dr. Pibb.
Nobody buys a pair of sneakers and then goes and gets online and calculates the cost of the rubber and the laces and the padding. The materials are not the cost of a product. Yeah. But in our industry, everybody feels this, like, and what it's tipping. It's the power of tipping. The power to the guest.
It's the driver.
Artificial false power that allows them to think that they understand the cost and the structure of what we do. Like, okay, take any piece of it out.
Like I said, no matter how good a person is, it creates a sense of malice and a sense of power to them that it causes a problem that shouldn't be there.
Yeah, chicken costs $6.99 a pound. That's correct. So go buy it. Actually, you know what the truth is? Chicken could be free. Buy an egg.
Right.
Fucking incubate it.
Yeah.
Feed it for 6 years, or butcher it.
We're getting down to price points. Like, customers can get lost in that. But let me ask you, what would be the motivation for you, aside from the fact that you love the hell out of this industry?
Yeah.
You already own one restaurant. You're gonna be opening up a second one.
That's right. Siempre
for a no tip policy, and this is from a server perspective.
Yeah.
What really would motivate you to be there? Because I'll be honest with you, unless I know
what would motivate me as an employee.
Yeah. A brand new restaurant opening up, what would honestly motivate you in today's culture with everything stands? Because personally, I'd be receptive to, because I'd be like, depending on where I'm at, and I'm not necessarily a full-time server anymore, so I don't necessarily need that, but it's my main income. If I don't believe in the place and nothing about it, I'm probably going to be reluctant to do it, because you need to believe in the actual place, you need to believe in the product, and I think that's a huge problem. And again, without any fluctuation, if we're all getting paid the same, well, what the hell is my skill set going to do then?
Right. Well, I think that the short answer is there's not much incentive at first glance because you're um I think that if you were new, if you were like just starting out,
Yeah.
there's quite a bit of incentive because you don't know any different.
Yeah.
And you can also say like, hey, there's a stability involved. And so I think if stability is something that you're looking for, then I think it's quite attractive if you understand it.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a minute to understand. The fact is, I think most servers are not hyper stability oriented like in their work because like a lot of us come to this as like it's a transition. You're between jobs or you're in school or whatever it is. So the variability of it becomes kind of a part of what's attractive about it. So, and of course there's exceptions, but so I think if you're looking for stability, that would be like the first thing you can say, because people that do know tipping are able to say this is going to be something, this is going to be a money you make, and what comes along with that, benefits that a lot of servers don't get. Other things start to come together from it. But yeah, at first glance, you just see it as I'm taking less home today, and I think that Danny Meyer had a really thoughtful response to this, and I'd encourage watching the video that he did discussing his policy, because he first wanted to do it, and I've discussed it with my employees or past employees, like after the Echo days, because I've been mulling it over. What's a good model that works, and
that changes restaurant to restaurant.
I think the one thing that's lost when you go no tipping theoretically, and what a lot of servers don't like about it is, the one thing that tipping does is it creates an incentive.
Yeah.
Now the problem is it's a slightly flawed logic but the overriding trend is that there's an incentive. If it's 20% of X, then you want to increase X.
Well,
the more I sell, the more I make.
Immediate gratification. I think front of house and servers, we tend to be a bit more selfish. So you're right in that sense, but it also creates a competitiveness though as well. You take that away, most servers don't have the same investment because they're not brought up the same way as cooks on chef side. Like we don't have that militant kind of mandate that you have in the back of house. So the only reason you're there is because you can make quick, easy money and get the fuck out.
When your reference point is your tip, that's an evaluation of you as a person and as an employee. Then you also for people that have pride, and there's a lot of great servers out there that are like, you take pride in being a big earner. Like in killing it. It's a reflection of your excellence, which again makes it suck because it's not just, the trend is a reflection of your excellence, but people can take that away from you in a heartbeat, or they can walk off with your signed copy, which, they don't, in which case you've done nothing wrong and they're not even trying to communicate, something negative to you. The restaurant gets their money and they get away and you don't get paid. You don't get your, that should be your wage. But I think that, the thing that he did was when you lose the incentive to like that push, and salesmen ought to be incentivized, commission and all that. So he kind of created it as a bit of a commission issue where I think what they did is they all made a base wage, and there was a bit of an adjustment based on, I think, how long you'd been there. It's not something I'm into, but and
let's keep
your specific kind of skill level or something.
I think it's tougher for a restaurant that's already established to a degree to make that.
Well, and they took a smaller percentage, but there was still a percentage commission on your sale, because there's a bit of a thrill in that too, and knowing you landed the big fish. You sold the Opus One, and that's you. I would not want to take that away. When you take the dynamic of incentive and But could it change from something that I think when you put it into a situation where an environment where, what I like the idea of, and I think it's tricky, and the law makes it very hard. So you have to find a way to make sure that it's transparent and looks good. Is that if there is, if you'd encourage teamwork and encourage a long view by having tip pools, and I've worked in tip pools, I've worked not in tip pools. It's a simple thing, like what's good and what's bad.
Yeah.
And always what's bad is if you work with a bunch of slack asses and that like you just crushed it tonight and like give away a third of your money. Sometimes there's luck involved, but the main thing is really excellent servers generally don't like the tip pool because most people aren't as good as they are. They don't work as hard and they don't care as much. But if you get to the point where you guys are like you know every day that you're in the same boat, and there's like an incentive that's going to be, if we all make money, then we all make money. Then you start actually legitimately supporting each other. Some people do it kind of altruistically. It's in their makeup to be it. Like you or our girl Maddie over at Stage that like comes in an hour early and sets up the whole place for everybody. Yeah. That's everybody's work. She just does it because that's in her nature to do it. Yeah. But to make it something where, we all have this job and it benefits all of us to get it done and to get it done well and to sell well. I think all of a sudden you start to create a dynamic of like actual, we're incentivized to work well, to sell, to work well together, to support each other, and to maintain this space, because those are like when you look at the finance of it.
Do you think, Van, switching like no tip would essentially do away with bad service and selfish mandates so that as well, then, and take away from that? Because it's a tough thing, because I think it's going to work for some restaurants, it's not going to work for others. But
I think that, of course nothing's perfect, but I think that the overall trend would move the needle in the right direction. Yeah. It's some places would fall off. I mean, in a model that takes all that nonsense out of it, it's imperfect, but it's better.
You're not investing in a shift then. You're basically investing in the actual profession. You're investing in a role, and you're investing in the restaurant and whatever that restaurant's mission may be.
Right.
And then again, that's at long-term view, but currently with the no-tip policy, I don't think anybody really has that. Because no one comes in this industry, unless you go to culinary school, really that, especially from that perspective. I don't hear a single server being like, I'm going to be a server the rest of my life.
Yeah.
So I hear when you're 25, you're 26, you're going on 30. You know what? I'm going to take this to the next level. I'm going to become a sommelier. I'm going to like try out my own restaurant.
Yeah.
You don't hear anybody at 19, 20 being like, yeah, I'm going to be a lifer. No.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen. And that's a huge, huge problem, I think. And
yeah. It's a shame, because I think that, that long view, if you're a salesman and you know that you're really only earning the big time is like when you're making the sales, like when you but there's 1,000 things that go into that. A good salesman knows that time spent reading books by great salesmen and books about marketing and learning about their product. If you sell cars and you know a lot about cars, you tend to probably have a better shot than the guy who knows jack shit about the product. Same thing in a restaurant. You just don't feel it in the same way with the same long view. I know that if my experience and my reading about product, like people feel confident and when people feel confident, they'll spend more, they'll buy more, because the likelihood that they're making a good choice is higher. But so the good salesman knows the time even that I'm not getting paid and the time that I'm not directly making a sale, I can still drastically increase my earning by doing other things. As a server, it's very mercurial. It's a lot harder to see. And as much as we would try to make the point all the time, if you guys, you learn something about our wine list today, you can make more money today. And that was my way of trying to tap into what I saw as this this amazingly short site. So it's kind of like saying, I'm going to try to put a carrot in front of you that's tailored to the way that you see.
Yeah.
But what if we also said, like, there's a whole lot of carrots in front of you and they all get bigger and juicier? Like you're also increasing your earning moving forward. And if you've done this and you've invested in yourself and you've invested in your team and all that, then you start to have a broader view. And I think that in some settings, that's a bad thing. A lot of restaurants don't. Same thing with the guests. You don't want them to know too much. Like, you don't want to see how the sausage is made. That, or, that there's a lot of that. Those are like the old jokes. But a really good restaurant, Justin Severino wants you to see how it's made because it's made with great ingredients and great technique and integrity of product. So it's like, and that's when I think I'm saying that in this game, it's like, it's chess and checkers. It's just that checkers pays a lot better.
Before I wrap up and take us out, San Briago, have you thought about making it no tip?
Yeah. Well, so where I'm at, and I it's still an unresolved issue, and I've been
Because you're gonna have how many staff are you gonna have front house, back house wise?
I think 4. Well, I guess
And you also have the north side problem.
back out. Yeah,
There's not much going on north side quite yet.
Sure.
I mean, up and coming, but was still, I'd say,
we're
stagnant right now.
There's a big period of change there.
It's on like the cusp. It's been on the cusp for a while, but it feels like we're getting a bit closer.
Yeah,
but it still seems so far away.
There's a lot of contrast, and I think that seeing things like, Casalula going in was like,
Casalula was a heavy blow. That was
yeah, no, because it was such a great thing to see something so beautiful in that space, and just that kind of environment, and then
it's a great space,
and to
cool
lose it
hell,
quickly,
and
it was a gut punch. And everybody like, what is this? Does this mean something bigger? But
I think it really quantifies Northside's problem, which isn't a conversation for this show.
Sure.
But
but
it's isolated in not just dynamics of the circle, but neighborhoods and everything else.
We'll be about staff of about 15, for bar staff, servers, support staff. It'd probably be about 8 folks, 8 or 9 to start. We're gonna just do limited service. I'm not gonna be doing like lunch and dinner. So so at first it'll be a smaller group, and I've run the numbers over and over and over and try to figure out. I am not gonna start no tipping like right off. Just the whole thing. It just feels too risky. I mean,
It puts like a red flag on your restaurant. Well, I have to be there,
and I have to own the fact that it's out of fear, to hurt the potential for the restaurant to get started. I'm afraid to do it because watching it already like fail in the north side,
which is tough,
is one thing.
If you were in a different, this is a loaded question, so don't feel fresh. But if you were in a different neighborhood, would you think about it? Say, if you're in Lawrenceville, would you be more inclined to make it no tipping?
Maybe, yeah. I mean, I can't say. I mean, it's hypotheticals are hypothetical. I tend to think so. I mean, if I was in Chicago, I would definitely think about it.
Yeah.
But I thought long and hard about that. So the way I saw it is like, on the one side there's business as usual. That's what I did at Echo. We did it. We found ways to fit incentives into pieces of our service, like banquet service. Was a different setup, but without getting all the minutia of that, I'm hoping to find some kind of path, a more central path that's closer to the no tipping. But there's a lot of, it's a pretty, it's a really constrictive.
Tough, yeah.
The law and the code it's tough, and it's designed to. I mean, at one point I was looking at, there are restaurants that are run as, what are they called, co-ops, and like it's cool things about that, but it's like it's something that and it's very seriously something I've like been wrestling with for.
Is it in a
long
long-term plan? Essentially, would that be the ultimate goal for you?
Yeah, I mean, it'll be a long-term goal. I think, yeah, I'd like to see all restaurants go to that, and I would like to do that. And it'll be something that, if we do open in like the traditional, the normal model, it'll be something that I'll be addressing, throughout. I had a lot of big plans with the first place, and what it comes down to is the restaurant has to be all of my goals to, all of my lofty goals for taking care of my people and doing it the right way and all that. All the great intentions of the world die on the vine if the restaurant closes.
Yeah.
And if if you're not profitable, so yeah, it's hard. I mean, it's a huge tip of the cap from me to the folks that have the guts to do it, and for Sonia, for example, and for Marco actually, because none of them started out that way, and to be established and have a model that's working and to be making money, and then to hang it out there like that.
I think that's a big thing,
and you're going to shake your staff up when you do that, and so it's like that's a calculated, bold risk, and I respect it. And I'm
curious to see how many, because I think a lot of their guys stayed on. I'm not sure about Dinette as well,
but I remember,
it's a testament to and that's what the conversation.
A few people fell off right away. Yeah. It was very much I was bartending. I was at Acacia at the time, and some of their folks would come to us, and it's like it always happens when you do something big, the sky is falling.
Yeah.
So like people were freaking out, and a lot of them hung on, and and started to see. I can't speak too intelligently about the inner workings of it because I'm not there.
Yeah.
But
I think as
Well, I
long as
mean,
you have
just
your core people,
yeah,
you can get it done essentially.
it's the fact that it's been years and they're still doing it. I mean, it must, that says as much as I really need to know.
Yeah.
But I think operating from a position of strength, I think you can make a move like that. Opening a totally unknown entity in an environment that hasn't seen anything like it, and 4 blocks away, a place that just tried it, went under.
Yeah.
I couldn't feel less in a position of strength in regards to that one piece. So, but I mean, yeah, I crunch numbers just about daily and turn it over and look at it from another side and try to find the angle. And I think what it comes down to is, I think in a perfect world, like, for me, would, I think if something where you kind of have a module where everybody's kind of got a little buy-in together, but it requires something different than the norm. Requires a real level of, you kind of have to take a leap of faith, and you have to be willing to put some time into thinking about it and paying attention.
Yeah.
And a fair, in fairness to the average, to Johnny guest, people don't want to think about it. You don't want to have to sit and think hard about the restaurant. The whole point is that it's supposed to be an easy enjoyment.
Yeah.
It's so, but unfortunately,
this conversation has to happen for
like,
this to take
you don't
place,
want to see how the sausage is made. No, you do. You don't want to see how you don't want to see how your iPhone's made.
But no, before I do my outro here.
Yeah.
What's the proposed date for Siempre Algo then too?
Yeah, right now I'm targeting for opening, looking at about May 1st. We'll see. Siempre Algo, always something. So we're allowing for construction. I think they're going to be wrapping it up in the end of March. They think maybe even a touch early, but
very nice.
make sure everything goes well with the city. But we'll be opening sometime around there. SiempreAlgoPGH.com. You'll see some photos and updates, and there's about to be a lot more going up. So we're hitting it hard right now, and it's going to be awesome.
Very nice. Now I'm excited for it. I know Northside's excited for it as well. We definitely need something on East Ohio sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
But now for everybody listening, as always, want to thank you guys for tuning in. It's the 86'd Life. Guest was Brian Hammond, and I don't think we necessarily solved the tipping model, but I think we addressed a couple key points to what makes it happen, what works, what doesn't work, and ultimately some restaurants it may work for, and hats off to the guys that are able to make it happen. Ultimately, me personally, I like to see it across the board, but it takes a little bit of a mandate from, I think, front of house servers acknowledging the fact that you have to commit to this as a profession and stepping up your standards and taking this as a serious profession. And that's a conversation that needs to happen both at the table and outside of the restaurant itself from a customer standpoint. But tune in next week. I'm actually going to have one of Good Food Pittsburgh's lead writers, Madly Quigley, on. So it'll be kind of exciting getting an opposite kind of view of how the kind of the foodie and the blog culture really dictates and mandates customers and just visitors coming into Pittsburgh. She's a very successful Instagram. I believe she was voted top 100 Instagrams by Zagat. Yeah, so really excited to see kind of how that kind of works and just the feedback she gets from guests. But I also want to thank Point Park and the Center of Media Innovation, and of course Andrew Conti, the director of the Center of CMI. As always, guys, follow me 86 Life on Facebook, Twitter. We got Patreon now. But as always, thanks for the support, and take you out with the chorus, my favorite music of all time, the good old Brass Masters. They pops me up every time, man.
Dude, I live for it.
Has it gone through?
We're good? I don't hear it.